But I think Amshuman is his name. I've forgotten now. So I'll read the verse and the purport. Do we say Om Namo Bhagavate? Okay, so here it is, 9/8/23. Tam Tvam Aham Jnanam Ganam Swabhava Pravastamaya Gunabedamohai Sanandananjaya Munibir Vivavyam Katam Vimuddha Parivavayami. The translation is, O my Lord, sages freed from the influence of the three modes of material nature, sages such as the four Kumaras, and here this is in brackets, Sanat, Sanaka, Sanandana, and Sanatana, are able to think of you who are concentrated knowledge. But how can an ignorant person like me think of you? Srila Prabhupada's purport. The word swabhava refers to one's own spiritual nature or original constitutional position. When situated in this original position, the living entity is unaffected by the modes of material nature. Sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. That's a quotation from Bhagavad Gita 14:26. As soon as one is freed from the influence of the three modes of material nature, he is situated on the Brahman platform. Vivid examples of the personalities thus situated are the four Kumaras and Narada. Such authorities can, by nature, understand the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but a conditioned soul, not freed from the influence of material nature, is unable to realize the Supreme. In Bhagavad Gita 2:45, therefore, Krishna advises Arjuna, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. One must rise above the influence of the three modes of material nature. One who stays within the influence of the three material modes is unable to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's Srila Prabhupada's translation. So here we are receiving directions for knowledge. Now, when we go to school, in our high schools and universities and things like that, we are given knowledge. If you go to university, at the beginning, you have to buy a lot of books, study a lot of texts, read a lot of commentaries, listen to the teacher. This is the process of knowledge. But they recognized what here, when you see this, they would say what we have is religion. They have knowledge, and we have at best faith or sentiment. We put our faith somewhere. But by the way, when you go to school, at a university or college or even high school, you start with faith, because our process began. Ado Shraddha, from the beginning there's Shraddha, there's some preliminary phase. Then our process is, the next thing is Anartha Nirvritti, the removal of unwanted things. But that anartha nivritti, as we understand it, doesn't take place in the colleges and universities. It's not knowledge as far as we're concerned. You read all these books, you study all these things, but what you are like personally is not part of the process of knowledge. But here, the process of knowledge says you are free from contamination of the modes of material nature. That is to say, and we are given good instruction. What are the modes of goodness? What is the mode of passion? And what is the modes of ignorance? These three, it's a whole chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. And our process of knowledge is we have to act in such a way that the influence of at least the modes of passion and ignorance are eliminated. Now, when you go to school, you have to do some work. That is to say, school and our culture, you have to do some work. So you can't be completely lazy. If you're completely in the modes of ignorance, you won't even get up to go to class, which a lot of people don't once they get into college. They usually are not there the second year. But you have to at least get up and go to class and make some show of attendance and do enough to get at least a passing grade, But so the mode of ignorance has to be a little gone. But as far as the mode of passion goes, our whole culture is based upon the mode of passion. It's about making money. That's what we do mostly in America. Why do you go to school? So you can get good grades. Why do you want to do that? So you can get a good job, so you can make money. So that's our way of going. So we are based on this modes of passion. So, but this idea here, when you say you have to be free from contamination of all the modes, then people don't understand. Oh, that's mysticism. What does that mean? That we don't have to know that. You don't have to be spiritually pure. Well, in other words, how do we become free from the modes of material nature? By following the regulative principles. No meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, these kinds of things. Those are moral principles? No, they're not. They are principles of knowledge. Well, they're not merely moral principles. They're principles of knowledge. So this path of knowledge that we are on is not recognized by our society in general, which is aimed at through the mode of passion to being a success. That's what they do. The people who are contribute knowledge, well, what do? They can contribute some kind of technical knowledge. Technical knowledge, actually, Prabhupada says, is knowledge of a trade. It's just how to do something. And that's what material science is. You learn how to do things. And you do this so you can make money. That's what a successful education is. The universities want you to have this kind of education because you become rich and then you give them funds to endow so they get more money. So this is how this system works. So they will not recognize what we do because here you have to be freed from the modes of material nature. Because the Lord is jnana jnanam, concentrated knowledge. That's the term that's used here. This concentrated knowledge, this intensified goodness. That has to be your nature. Prabhupada puts at the end, at this purport, how you can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Uh, uh, Prabhupada quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, rise above the influence of the three modes of material nature. And he says here, one who stays within the influence of the three material modes is unable to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality Godhead is the absolute truth. The absolute truth means that which being known, all other things become known. That also is not like, because there's Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is a person, and he has his energies. And so when you know the Lord, then you can also know, as far as he wants you to know, what are the Lord's energies and how they work. So you actually can learn how to deal with the material nature too, in such a way. People don't recognize it because unless you know a way to monetize Krishna consciousness, you you won't be recognized as having contributed anything, because they don't recognize this idea of coming up to the modes, of being liberated from the modes of nature. That's the real achievement, that you are not controlled by these modes of nature. You rise above the influence of the three modes. But when you understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, does that mean you don't deal with the material energy? No, but you see the material energy in a different way. Prabhupada once talked about how actually everything is spirit. He said, he was talking about we are walking in New Vrindavan through the forest, and he pointed to the tree, and he said that this tree, just like this tree, is actually fire in a different form. The tree takes in sunlight, which is fire, and then grows the wood. And if you take the wood and you ignite it, again, it comes out as fire again. So wood is actually fire in a different form. He says, similarly, everything is spirit. That's what he said. Everything is spirit. There is no, actually, ultimately, there is no such thing as matter. Everything is spirit. And I got really confused because, and I said to Prabhupada, I'm trying to understand the difference between matter and spirit. I'm not my body. But now you're saying everything is spirit. And he said this, and his answer to me was, we are not Mayavadis. And I said, how does that answer the question? He said, we are not Mayavadis. There are different kinds of spirit. There's differentiation, you know. It's not all one. There's different kinds of spirit, he said like this. So also, when we actually are advanced in Krishna consciousness, we will see that way also. There are different kinds of spirit, and you run across people who don't know that. So you have to deal with them, but they are also different kinds of spirit. And Prabhupada described Krishna consciousness as the process of the re-spiritualization of matter. Take the matter that I am most connected with right now, which is my material body, right? Little stickers and peelers, stealers and pickers that Shakespeare calls them in one of his plays, that, you know, just use them for crime. Our hands, our eyes, oh, we're going to look at the Playboy bunny or whatever, or watch porn, or, you know, all our senses are contaminated by sense gratification, they lose their spiritual nature because we are doing something separate from Krishna. Krishna is the enjoyer and the controller, but I am thinking I am the enjoyer and I am the controller. Therefore, I have gone into competition with God. And my God project means, yeah, there is no other big enjoyer and controller, and other people who are trying to do it, I'll conquer over them. This is the materialistic, they got all their God project, of course. And they think they're pretty big until, at the time of death, you surrender to Krishna. You have no choice, right? I'm the greatest, I'm number one, I'm this thing, all the big deals I am. But what happens at the time of death? Krishna comes to you in the form of death, and boom, you bow down to him. You offer your submission. You can't avoid it. So everyone must surrender to Krishna. There's the good way and there's the rough way. The rough way, you get your little God project going and then you surrender at the time of death. But we surrender to Krishna in the beginning, and our bowing down to Krishna is wonderful. We understand we're of the same nature as Krishna and that we're intimately connected. How intimately connected? Well, in our heart, the jiva is there, but he's not alone. Actually, in our body, there are two people, the Atma and the Paramatma. The Paramatma is of the same nature as the Atma. So that's a very intimate connection. When I know other people through the body, all I really know is their bodies, and I can only guess at what they're like as spirit souls. But here, there's yourself and there's Krishna together. So not only does Krishna become revealed, but you become revealed. Your own spiritual, eternal nature in relationship to Krishna. That is what happened. So that's very interesting. There's no other living being that we are part and parcel of. Prabhupada used that term, part and parcel of Krishna. And so knowing Krishna is like knowing yourself. Can you doubt your own existence? Is it possible to doubt your own existence? That Satchitananda, the thing that at least we know is Sat, we exist right now. Can you doubt your own existence? No, because who's doubting? So you can't doubt your own existence. Then when we have a full self-knowledge, we also know that we are part and parcel of Krishna, and we cannot doubt his existence any more than we can doubt our own. So this is the knowledge, infallible knowledge. It's just, an advanced devotee has and these great sages, they are the example. The four Kumaras, and they are able to think of you, and the word is Jnananganam, Jnana Gana, concentrated knowledge by their spiritual nature. So they are like that. To become close to God, you have to become like God. If you want to enter fire, you have to become fire. So the same way, to become, to get to know God, this is what you need to do. So you should not think of what we are doing in the Krishna consciousness movement as simply a religion among all different religion, which is based on belief and where you've placed your faith. When you go to school, you place your faith. When you're a child, your first authorities who teach you things are your parents. You have no choice. You're a child. You don't know anything. Somebody has to give you guidance. And unfortunately, the people who give you guidance are not really able to do so. The best that they can tell you is what they know, which is not much. You can do better because some of your guides may be in them. Your parents are usually, at least if they're good parents, are in the modes of passion. But modes of passion, you have to work hard to do things. And your friends who are in the modes of ignorance, friends of your same age, they introduce you to illicit activities that your parents don't want you to engage in, and which you have to hide from them. But since everybody has also things they're ashamed of, everybody's hiding all kinds of things from everybody else anyway. They lead dual existences. So that's another thing. So here, by Krishna consciousness, this is our process of knowledge. And when Prabhupada was asked by the reporters in an airport, why have you come to the West? He said, I've come to give you a brain. I've watched these reporters, had it, in those days they still had little pads and pencils. Prabhupada said, I've come to give you a brain. And I saw the pencils stop and they all look up. And then he described very quickly, standing in an airport, because those days you could be in airport behind the security. Prabhupada said, in your society, he eventually said to them, he explained Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. And he said, in your society, everyone is a Shudra, and there are a few Vaishyas. That's America. Everyone is a Shudra, and there are a few Vaishyas. If you get a paycheck, you're a Shudra. You know that. The Brahmanas, they live on donations. They don't get a paycheck. That they're not employees. So the Kshatriyas can live on taxation. That they're able to do. That's their source of income because they protect people, so they give you something so you can have the means to protect them. That's what a Kshatriya does. The Vaishyas, of course, their means of livelihood is trade, and America is a Vaishya country. The founders of the United States of America were Vaishyas. That's why they like slavery. That's the best kind of Shudras, slaves. Now we're called wage slaves. So we get paid, but we're think of ourselves as free, but we're in bondage anyway to who our paymaster is, who's giving us money. So this is what Prabhupada, he really wanted to establish Varnashram Dharma, to begin by giving the brain. And how will that take place socially? I think we have to first become the brain. I think we need enough devotees to actually practice Krishna consciousness as a process of knowledge and see that in ourselves, first of all, the effects of the modes of passion and ignorance are disappearing. That's our regulative principles. we think of them as moral principles: no illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling. At best, these are moral principles. And moral principles means you go to heaven or you go to hell. You're promoted or you're not, materially speaking. That's what we think of moral principles, reward and punishment. But these are principles of knowledge. And the world needs people to have that knowledge who can guide society. And Prabhupada really, he established this, in God we trust party for purified leaders. It was an experiment to actually have people become. We had those running for office, and it was a very interesting platform of preaching to people. Ultimately, circumstantially, we couldn't do it as part of ISKCON, so it became a divided thing, and Prabhupada didn't want to do that because if you're a tax-exempt religious organization, you can't engage in political activity. So they, separate you off from that. The churches can't endorse candidates or sponsor them or so on. That's the laws right now. So Prabhupada decided it wasn't worth setting up a second organization other than ISKCON itself for this political thing. But we did have this for a brief time, the In God We Trust party for purified leaders. And I was running, actually, one of the people running for office. Balavanta was the guy who started it. And it was very interesting to see the reaction of people to this. I mean, they really thought, let me look at this a little bit. But anyway, we stopped it. But that's Prabhupada's vision, was this reformation of human society. And we have to understand it not only as, practical things, but first of all, for education. And ISKCON is, an educational institution. It is teaching people knowledge. And I think as we become more and more competent of this kind of knowledge, that we see the modes of passion and ignorance are going away, we become situated in the modes of goodness. We start to look at Prabhupada's writings as telling us what's really going on in the world. It's not just what some Hindus believe, but it shows us our way to get through things. We also become, following these sages, we can be our own illusion becomes removed, and then we can also be the brain that Prabhupada wanted us to do. We have another translation of this verse by Bhanu Swami. He's following. He gives us the purport of Vishwanath Chakravarti somewhere. His translation was, "How can I, so bewildered, think of you who are concentrated knowledge, who are realized naturally by sages like Sananda, who have destroyed illusion and the conception of difference caused by the gunas of Maya." So that's the way, be vimudda. You've been made a fool by the modes of material nature. And so that's the question. How can an ignorant person like me think of you? Well, here, this is what the Bhagavatam is teaching us, how we can overcome these things. You notice there, we have two Bhagavatas, the book Bhagavatam and the person Bhagavata, Srila Prabhupada and those who follow him, who can teach us according as Srila Prabhupada taught us, and thus also liberate us from the modes of material nature. And if we have been, that favor's been done to us, we also have to repay these people who have given us all this by their effort, I mean, we saw how hard Srila Prabhupada worked in his very old age to go to a foreign country, to translate these books, to travel everywhere, to go to the Moscow Book Festival and try to make a devotee there. Uh, uh, so he said this is this Bhagavatam is meant to change society, a misdirected civilization, and Bhagavatam is meant to correct it. So that's our mission, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. And so if we have been favored by Krishna consciousness and becoming free from the modes of material nature, how do we repay that favor? We also try to give Krishna consciousness to others. I guess I'll stop there and see what we have, any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Bro, for explaining, especially your hallmark point, like about the principles of knowledge. I always appreciate when you speak about them as principles of cognition. It's such an interesting point. Thank you very much for sharing that. If any devotees have any comments or questions, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Ravindra Svarupa, Dandavat Pranams. Thank you so much for such a nice lecture. I have a few questions, but I'll start off with, you had mentioned this, and we know that the process starts with Shraddha, and the way to get out of this world is through prema. But starting with Shraddha, what faith, I've always really wondered what that really meant, because if I just take my own personal experience of how I came into Krishna consciousness, I didn't start the process because I believed Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I accepted that. I was later taught that. So, and if you even look at being part of Bhakti Center, how do people come in? They're somehow attracted to maybe the energy of Bhakti Center, and then they attend a Thursday night kirtan and they love it, and then they get in contact with devotees and start talking. It's not that they came in and said, this is a bona fide path and Krishna is the Supreme Person of Godhead, so I am going to follow it and I have faith. It's almost seems like it's an intangible almost feeling that, okay, this feels good, this feels right, and okay, then it's, I think in the Christian philosophy, it's something called faith-seeking understanding. So somehow you have this faith, and I would have said it's some sort of Sukriti, and Krishna guided you, and then, but everything that I can't even, I guess it's not full in my awareness of how I started, but it's not so concrete. It's everything. It's almost like I came in, I was attracted to it, and then I accepted the philosophy. I accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I now have faith in the Shastra, but I don't know. I could venture to say it, and of course, Krishna guides based on your desires. But if I similarly somehow got in contact with, say, the Mayavadis, then it seems like I would have just accepted that philosophy. I'm told that, this is an illusion, and they have really great arguments. I've heard them before. And so how you start, if you could just talk a little bit more about what the Shraddha means, because it just seems so intangible. And I've heard, again, it's you accept Krishna as the Supreme Person of Godhead. I'm like, I didn't come into Krishna consciousness knowing that and then believing it and then starting the process of that. I was taught that, and then I accepted it. Even just all of the stories, the 10th canto, I'm accepting that. I did not consciously live in this lifetime with Krishna in those stories, but I accept those stories. And so if you could talk a little bit more about what the Shraddha means, this faith to start the process, that'd be very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, it's preliminary faith in the beginning. It's preliminary. Well, it's like just, these Hare Krishna people, like, they're kind of interesting, let me go see. It's like a curiosity sometimes, and it may not go beyond just this beginning interest. When you pay attention to something, there's a kind of granting your consciousness to somebody or something, and either you like it or you don't. And if you like it, then you stay around for a little more. So that's the preliminary faith, ado shraddha. And then if that faith goes on, sadhu sangha, you'll stay around. You'll associate with devotees. And then you'll start to practice Krishna consciousness. Well, let me try it too. And so then there's some practice of Krishna consciousness. And then if you practice goes on, then there's anartha nirvritti. You see that the modes of passion or the modes of ignorance are going away. You feel better. Because the result of the mode of passion is misery. And if you've been raised in a culture where the mode of passion is predominant, you're somewhat miserable. You may not even acknowledge your misery, but you can say, I've already been a success so far, but I'm still not happy. There's something missing in my life, that kind of thing. This is I could tell a story about this. This is what you may be disappointed. I have one person who had visited many saints and saintly persons and had been disappointed, and he said they're all phony. He hasn't. Well, I was in Krishna consciousness. I was enthused about Krishna consciousness, and he said, they're all of them disappointing. You'll be disappointed. He was pretty sure because he'd gone to this yogi and this yogi and this yogi and this yogi, found insufficient. They're fake. That was his day. And he was the chairman of a religion department too. By the way, that was his thing. So it's preliminary. It's preliminary, but you start to think, maybe I should. You're still eating meat. I mean, I give up meat eating and see what happens. And so then you practice. Let me chant Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll buy a set of beads from the temple, and I'll sit down and I'll chant a few rounds a day and see what happens. It's just an experiment. You're not convinced. You're enough to try it. And then something begins to happen. There's something attractive about it. And then you get some Krishna conscious literature. And it starts to make sense. Before, first time you read it, this is so weird, And I by the way, when I first came, it was a challenge. Devotees in the very beginning, it was pretty early in the movement, they were always on your case, I remember like when you walk in and say, take your shoes off. Your feet are really dirty. You don't know what you stepped to. You're going to come into God's place. You got to take your shoes off. They're always chastising you. Don't blow out the candle. You realize your mouth is the filthiest part of your body and you're blowing out the candle? I mean, they really were like that. I mean, they were on your case all the time. I almost go back in spite of the devotees instead of because of them, But there was something about what they had that was just attractive and do it. And then I finally understood a little bit about Srila Prabhupada. We didn't know who Srila Prabhupada was. This was a new temple had just come to the city of Philadelphia, and they didn't have a Vyasasana. So they had a picture of Prabhupada up on the mantle above a fireplace. It didn't work, but there was a mantle there. And they had a picture of Prabhupada. And when you came in, they handed you some flowers and they said, put it beneath that picture. So you put these flowers on the at the base of this picture with this old Indian guy, you know who he was, and then they told you to bow down. So you did. You don't know why or who it was or what it was about. Nobody explained anything, you know. But they thought that, you know, when you come in, you should actually make some offering to Srila Prabhupada. I so suppose there was some agyata sukriti, some unknown good deed was being happening, may have done something, but, you know, the devotees were like really heavy about the thing. Uh, uh, One time I looked into the kitchen. Don't look in that. We're cooking that food for Krishna. He has to be the first one to eat it. You know, don't look in the kitchen. You know, they're always on your case. You know, and but there was something there that made me wanted to keep on going, even though the devotees were quite in the mood of scolding and somewhat off-putting. Uh, but you know, that's what happens. So that's what it is like at the beginning. But then that faith increases. It becomes firmer and firmer, and then there's knowledge. And there's that in the material world too. You know, you go into a classroom, you don't know who the guy is. They say these are books of knowledge. You read them, you study them. You know, that's also you've placed faith. So we're not different in that way. And if you follow this practice, also you'll see that you are something is changing in you, and that's what you want to happen. I mean, I was a little scared because the process was so powerful that after I got into Krishna consciousness, I didn't know what to do with myself. All the things that I used to do were no longer things that interest me so much anymore. And I didn't have enough Krishna consciousness to go further. So it was a weird situation, but it was working. And first, I wasn't sure I wanted to work. So then I thought, well, let me do some of my material activities again. And I didn't like it so much anymore. So they were spoiling me already. This is how, but the potency was there.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible answer. Thank you for sharing your experience as well. Hare Krishna.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. There is also a comment by Venkatapata Prabhu in the chat box. It's like a comment come question. You want to have a look at it?
Oh, yeah, I look at it. Shall I read the question? Yeah, I guess people don't have it. Thank you for a thought-provoking class, as usual. I find some of these statements Srila Prabhupada makes about changing the world of Western civilization, we had to be the brains of the world, etc., a little bewildering. It seems like we are so far from that. How can we be the brains for society in general when it often feels that we barely are/have brains to run our own little tiny religious institution? How can we be paragons of sattva for the world at large when ISKCON itself seems to be so much enmeshed in rajas and tamas, infighting dysfunctions and so on? Plus, don't all religious movements, especially fundamentalist or littlest one, see themselves as future saviors of mankind? And there's what is that emoticon? Huh? A wink. Yeah, good question. One that's occurred to me also about our movement. And I can understand that we are a process. And if I want to help our movement become what Prabhupada wants it to be, because, you know, it doesn't always work that way. I mean, for example, Prabhupada himself was following the Gaudiya Madhav Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And eventually he had to start his own movement. Why didn't he continue Vishwanath, why didn't he continue Bhakti Siddhanta's movement? Because it had slipped. It had slipped. And Prabhupada complained about it, you know. People were arguing who gets the chair, who gets the buildings, who gets this thing, because he had a little success. They had Bhakti Siddhanta in a few short years, had driven this movement all over India. He had sent preachers to London. It was going on. They had festivals all over India. Things were happening, but then he didn't have anyone who actually carried on. The one person who was going to take the movement further turned out to be a big disappointment. He Bhakti Siddhanta recalled him from England. Something happened. We don't know exactly what it was, but he got disappointed in him, was going to send somebody else to the West. Bhakti Siddhanta left his body before that could happen. And so it got paralyzed. And so it looked like the whole thing was falling apart, and different people wanted their different positions in the temples and things like that. And Bhakti Siddhanta became disgusted with a lot of his followers. But there was Srila Prabhupada. He was not part of he was a householder. As Prabhupada said, my godmothers thought of me as a rotten householder. Because the good thing then was to be a sannyasi and do all this stuff. So Prabhupada was an outsider. But he had this instruction from his spiritual master to preach in English. And Prabhupada was astounded to get it, because this idea of preaching in English meant go to the West. That was the next thing. And everybody knew that. But Prabhupada said, well, I have this order. It looks like mission impossible, but I'll do it sometime. And so he had a big career set for him as taking over the pharmaceutical enterprise all over India. And he gave up on it. By then he had a wife, he had a family, he had to take care of them. So he got, in Allahabad, Prayag pharmacy. And so he was a householder and he was working. But he was also, translating. And he started to practice for himself, and nothing else, Back to Godhead magazine. And also, this is for educated Bengalis. They all knew English. That was one thing that was, the British had done, was taught a lot of Indians English. And so they knew English, and Prabhupada, so he started practicing with Back to Godhead. And then, when he finally was able to get some time and free from his business and settled something on his family, he started to translate Bhagavatam. And I have the 3 original volumes that Prabhupada came to the West with. The paper was terrible. The binding was falling apart. There were so many typographical errors. It was not perfect, but it was his effort and had potency. So gradually, he took it the next step further. And so I think it is a process. So what we can do is take care of what we have now for our own advancement in Krishna consciousness. That's the first thing we have to deal with. And we should become Krishna conscious ourselves, and we should share it with others. So you can understand that it's a gradual process. How fast it will go, how much ISKCON will become what it's supposed to be, that depends upon us. It may take another longer time, and Krishna's in charge of timing. I mean, you can see Prabhupada. He happened to come to America at just the right time. There was a whole group of young people who were, our parents had won World War II. They had lived through the Depression. They lived through World War II in America. They gave us everything. They didn't want us to suffer like they did in the Depression and all this stuff. So America was like at the top of the heap at that time. And so they gave us everything. And we had all of that. And we're thinking, some of us, there's something missing. There's something more. And you had the counterculture of the 60s. And then within that counterculture, there was Prabhupada's movement. And to be a devotee in those early days, you basically had to be a double dropout. You dropped out, because that was one of the slogans. Ginsburg's slogan, turn out, always come from tune in, turn out, and drop out. And this was somehow it had to do with smoking marijuana for tuning in. You tune in and smoke marijuana. And there was music, the Beatles and all those other kind of things. They were conveying the message of the, and then drop out. So everybody was dropping in. Turn on, first of all. You turn on Minja. And LSD, of course, psychedelic drugs. And then you tuned into the higher consciousness that gave you, and then you dropped out of, the materially motivated Western society. Didn't know where to go, looking for something more. I've tuned in, I've turned on, I've dropped out. Now what? And then within that, there was the Krishna consciousness movement. So these are gradual stages sometimes you have to go through. So for ourselves, wherever we are, we should advance in Krishna consciousness. It's a step-by-step process. Sometimes you take, 2 steps forward and then another step back and then keep on going, but keep on going. And we know the symptoms we look for, the modes of passion and the modes of ignorance. Clinically, they're described in our movement. I've made a big chart of them. If you want a chart, we can send it, of these modes, so you can identify them. And we want to see that the modes of passion and the modes of ignorance are going away. And when you chant Hare Krishna, you should chant Hare Krishna on beads, at least regularly, a certain amount. And you're asking Krishna, please engage me in your service. There's a corollary, please engage me in your service. Please disengage me from anything that blocks your service. That also you should pray. And not only will you progress, but the whole movement will progress that way. I hope that helps. Okay.
Thank you so much for very grateful to you for your association, and thank you all the devotees for the wonderful questions, and also Prabhu for the excellent answers. Looking forward to have your association next month also. Hope you can take out the time.
I'll be happy to. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada.
Ravindra Svarupa Prabhu ki.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.